Everyone thought the funeral would be the end of the tragedy. But when the small white coffins began to lower into the ground, a dull thump echoed from inside, and what happened next left an entire town speechless. Please drop your location in the comments. I love knowing where my viewers are watching from. Let's get into the story. It was Sunday morning, and the sky over Brookside was clear and pale. The kind of morning where everything felt quiet and slow. A little breeze moved the curtains in the Miller house, and Rachel Miller was standing in the kitchen flipping pancakes on the stove, humming a tune she didn't really know. She made these pancakes every Sunday. She always made 2 plates, one for each of her twins. She poured syrup into a smiley face on Emma's plate and made a road out of syrup on Eli's. He liked to drive his spoon through it like a car. It was their little game. Rachel smiled and shouted toward the staircase. "Pancakes are ready." She expected the usual stampede of feet coming down. But nothing came. She waited a few seconds, then called again. "Emma, Eli, you're going to miss the syrup." Still nothing. She wiped her hands on a towel and picked up both plates. "I'm coming up there," she said lightly, climbing the stairs. She walked down the hall to their shared room and turned the knob. The door opened with a soft creak. The room was bathed in morning light. The curtains were pink and orange. Toys were scattered neatly across the shelves. Books on the floor. The smell of syrup followed her in. Emma was curled up under her favorite pink unicorn blanket. Her head tilted slightly, a peaceful look on her face. Eli was next to her on his side, arms around his stuffed bear. Rachel smiled softly. Then she noticed something. They were both too still. Not just sleeping still. Not moving at all. She stepped closer, slowly. "Come on, you two," she said with a laugh. "You're going to make me eat these myself." Neither one moved. She put the plates down on the dresser. Her hands shook a little as she touched Emma's forehead. Cold. She touched Eli's cheek. Also cold. That's when the panic rushed in. Rachel's hands pulled the blanket off them. Her voice rose in pitch. "Emma? Eli? Wake up now." She shook them gently at first, then harder. Emma's arms flopped like a rag doll. Eli's legs didn't react at all. Rachel stumbled back and let out a scream so sharp it echoed down the stairs and out into the street. Mark, her husband, was outside checking the car's oil. He heard her and dropped the wrench, running up the porch and through the front door. "Rachel!" He took the stairs 2 at a time and stopped cold in the doorway. His wife was on the floor, holding both children, sobbing uncontrollably. "They won't wake up. They won't wake up." Mark rushed to them, putting his fingers on Emma's neck, then Eli's chest. He paused, eyes wide. Then he grabbed his phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, he couldn't find the words. All he said was, "They're not breathing. They're not breathing. Please, send someone." The paramedics arrived fast. Neighbors gathered on their lawns in silence as 2 stretchers were brought into the house. Rachel followed them, holding Emma's hand until they gently pulled her away. The doors shut. The sirens didn't even turn on. Rachel sat in the back of the ambulance, staring at the back of a medic's head. Mark was in the other one. Neither said a word on the way to the hospital. The streets of Brookside passed by quietly outside the windows, normal in a way that felt wrong. At the hospital, they were led to a small room with gray walls and a ticking clock. A nurse offered water. Neither of them drank it. After what felt like forever, a doctor came in. She was in her 50s, kind eyes, calm voice. "I'm sorry," she said. "We did everything we could." Rachel blinked. "But they were just sleeping. This morning, they were fine." The doctor sat down across from them. "There are no signs of trauma, no fever, no signs of poison or struggle. Their bodies just stopped, peacefully, simultaneously." "That doesn't make sense," Mark said. The doctor nodded. "We'll conduct a full autopsy. Could be something rare, a hidden heart condition. But right now we don't know." Rachel looked at the clock. Ticked softly. May 12th. The time of death was the same for both children. 7:12 a.m. Rachel stared at the time stamped on the paper. She read it over and over. It didn't feel real. Not the numbers. Not the facts. Nothing. She and Mark returned home that afternoon. The house was too quiet. She walked past the kitchen table and saw the plates still sitting there. Cold pancakes. Syrup dried into the shape of a smile and a road. She sat down on the floor and started crying. Outside, people gathered. Neighbors dropped off flowers and casseroles. Rachel's sister flew in that night and slept in the guest room. The days blurred. The funeral home called. They needed answers. Casket size, service date, flower choices. Rachel just said, white. Everything white. Emma's favorite color. She liked clouds and snowflakes and wedding dresses. Rachel chose 2 white caskets, small and plain. They would be buried side by side, just like they slept. Brookside Elementary closed for the day of the funeral. Teachers came in groups. Parents held their children tighter than usual. Mark didn't say much. He sat in silence, wearing the same suit he wore to his cousin's wedding. The church was packed. People brought flowers, photos, cards. Some wrote notes and tucked them into the caskets. Others just sat with tears rolling down their cheeks. Midway through the service, Rachel turned her head and noticed a man in the back of the room. He wore a long gray coat. He didn't cry, didn't sit, just stood still, hands at his sides. Rachel leaned toward her sister. "Do you know him?" "No," her sister whispered back. Rachel turned again, but the man in the gray coat was gone. Rachel stood, slowly, her eyes scanning the crowd. He hadn't walked past her, hadn't left through the main aisle. She whispered to Mark, "Did you see him?" "Who?" "There was a man, in a gray coat, just now." Mark looked confused. "I didn't see anyone." Rachel turned back, but the moment passed. The rest of the service went on. When it was over, they walked in silence behind the 2 small caskets as they were wheeled out of the church. The cemetery was quiet. Rows of headstones, a breeze moving through the tall grass. The coffins were placed above 2 deep holes in the ground. White flowers everywhere. The pastor said a short prayer. People took turns laying down roses. Rachel stood over them, holding one in each hand. The sky was overcast. The ground felt heavy. The ropes began to lower the coffins. And then they heard it. A thump. It came from one of the coffins. Soft, dull, but unmistakable. Rachel's entire body froze. A rose slipped from her hand and fell onto the lid of Emma's casket. People around her shifted. Some thought they imagined it. Then it came again. A single, hollow knock. From inside, Rachel stepped forward. "Stop lowering it," she said. The pastor paused mid-prayer. The 2 funeral workers looked at each other, unsure. Rachel turned to the nearest man. "Open it. Open it now." He hesitated. "Ma'am, that's not standard procedure." She grabbed him by the coat. "Open it." People were murmuring now, eyes wide. Some pulled out phones, others stepped back. No one knew what to do. One of the funeral workers ran for a crowbar. Rachel's fingers dug into the edge of the casket. Her nails scraped against the smooth surface. Took a minute, a horrible, long minute, and then the lid creaked. Emma's eyes were open. She blinked, slowly, as the light touched her face. Gasps broke out around the grave. Rachel dropped to her knees, reaching inside. "Emma? Baby? Can you hear me?" Emma's lips were moving. Her body shook as air filled her lungs again. The medic on site pushed through the crowd and dropped beside her, checking her pulse. "She's alive," he said, voice shaking. She's alive." Mark stood frozen. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Rachel pulled Emma up into her arms, holding her close, rocking slightly. "I've got you. You're okay now. I've got you." The crowd was silent. A mixture of awe, fear, and confusion settled over the group like a thick fog. People stepped back. The other coffin, Eli's, remained untouched. Emma coughed once, a sharp sound, and looked up at her mother. "He's not in there," she said softly. Rachel frowned. "What, baby?" Emma looked at the other coffin. "Eli's not in there." Rachel stared at her daughter. "What do you mean?" Emma sat up straighter, her breathing still weak. "He's not in that box. He wasn't with me." Rachel turned slowly toward the second casket. The funeral worker was still standing beside it, hands hovering. The medic stood and gently took Emma from Rachel's arms. "We need to get her to a hospital." Rachel barely heard him. Her hand rested on the second lid. Her chest felt tight. She looked at Mark. "Open it." He stepped beside her. "Ratch, open it." The man with the crowbar hesitated, then did as she asked. The lid came loose. Inside the casket, where Eli should have been, there was only his stuffed bear. Rachel fell backward. The tiny, brown one with the missing eye. The one Eli never slept without. But Eli was gone. Gasps turned to shouts. Mark leaned in, pulling back the blanket inside, checking every inch. Empty. Rachel's breath came short and fast. "Where is he?" The funeral director rushed forward. This can't be. I saw him placed myself. The body, he was in there. We closed it yesterday. It hasn't been touched. But it had been touched. Rachel remembered something. The man in the gray coat. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the crowd. He wasn't there. She looked at Emma, who was now on a stretcher being wheeled to the ambulance. She was watching her mother with wide eyes. Emma, Rachel called out. Where's Eli? Emma turned her head toward her. Her voice was soft, but clear. The man took him. Rachel ran over to the stretcher. What man, baby? Emma swallowed. The one in the coat. He was there. I saw him. He opened the lid and took Eli out. I tried to follow, but he was too fast. Rachel blinked. When did this happen? Emma looked up at the sky. Before the light came. It was still dark. He said Eli was special. Mark crouched down beside the stretcher. Do you remember anything else? Emma nodded. He had a box with wheels. He put Eli in it. Then the wheels squeaked. Mark looked up at Rachel. A gurney. Like a hospital bed. Rachel turned toward the funeral director. Show me your surveillance cameras. Rachel said again, sharper now. The director nodded. Yes, of course. They rushed to the building behind the chapel. In the back office, an old monitor showed 4 angles of grainy footage from the night before. Rachel watched every second of it. Midnight. Nothing. 2 a.m. Still. At 3:46 a.m. Movement. A figure in a long gray coat entered through the back door. He walked with slow steps, straight down the hallway. He passed the preparation room, entered the cold storage area. Then the screen flickered, and he was gone. Rachel pointed. There. Where did he go? No one left through that door, the director said quietly. Rachel looked back at the screen. The man had vanished without leaving. And Eli was gone. No body, no sign of him, just his bear, placed neatly on the silk lining, arms folded, like someone had taken their time. Rachel stood frozen, her fingers hovering over the empty space. The graveyard had gone quiet. Even the wind had stopped. Mark stepped forward and stared into the casket. This isn't possible. The funeral director kept shaking his head. We closed them together. It was locked. There's no sign of it being opened. Rachel turned, her eyes scanning the crowd. She wasn't looking for an answer. She was looking for a man. The man in the gray coat. He had been there. She knew he had. And now Eli was gone. She grabbed Mark's arm. He took him. Emma said she saw it. The man in the coat. Mark hesitated. We don't know that. He was here. I saw him at the funeral. They turned back to the casket, but it offered nothing. Just space and silence. Rachel looked toward the ambulance where Emma was being treated. She ran to her daughter. Sweetheart, she said, kneeling down. I need you to think carefully. You said the man took Eli. What did he look like? Rachel asked again. Emma blinked slowly. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, but her voice was steady. He was tall. His hair was gray like Grandpa's. He had a coat that went all the way to his knees. What color? Gray. Rachel swallowed. What did he say to you? Emma looked off toward the trees, remembering. He said Eli wasn't ready to go yet. He said he could fix him. Rachel's voice was soft. Fix him how? Emma looked down at her fingers. He had a bag, with wires, and a bed with wheels. I told him to stop, but he said it wouldn't hurt. Mark crouched beside them, stunned. She's describing a gurney. Medical equipment. The paramedic listening nearby frowned. You mean he pretended to be a doctor? No, Emma said. He said he used to be one. That's when Rachel stood up. Her hands clenched. We need to go to the police. Right now. They drove straight to the Brookside Police Department. Rachel carried Emma inside wrapped in a blanket. Mark walked stiffly behind, barely speaking. Detective Susan Keller was the one who met them. She had been a local cop for 20 years, never seen a case like this. She brought them into a quiet room and took their statement. As Rachel explained everything, the man in the gray coat, the missing body, Emma's description, Detective Keller took careful notes. I'll need to pull the surveillance footage from the funeral home, she said. We already saw it, Rachel said. He walked in at 3:46 a.m. Then the camera glitched. Keller raised an eyebrow. Glitched. Mark nodded. Just went black. No exit footage. And no sign of forced entry or tampering. We'll still need a forensic team on it, Keller said, standing. and we'll issue an alert for the body. Someone doesn't just walk out of a locked funeral home with a 6-year-old's corpse. Rachel looked at her. But he wasn't dead. Keller paused. Excuse me? He wasn't dead. He was alive when the man took him. He wasn't dead. He was alive when the man took him. Detective Keller stared at Rachel, her pen frozen mid-word. That's a serious statement. Emma nodded. He was breathing. The man made sure. He used something on him. Rachel touched her daughter's hand. She woke up in the coffin, just like he might have. They thought she was gone too. But she came back. Keller sat back in her chair, silent for a long moment. If what you're saying is true, then this man didn't steal a body. He kidnapped a child. The word kidnapped hung in the air like smoke. Within hours, an Amber Alert went out across the state. Detectives interviewed every worker at the funeral home. They checked all the doors. The footage was sent to digital forensics. But there was no sign of the man in the gray coat leaving. He simply vanished. Until the next day when the phone rang. It was just after sunrise. Rachel sat in the living room, holding Emma close under a quilt. Mark was on the phone with his brother when her phone vibrated in her lap. No caller ID. Just unknown. She answered. There was silence. Then, a small voice. Mom. Her body tensed. Eli, I'm okay, he said. I think I'm okay, but I don't know where I am. He says I can't come home yet. Rachel covered her mouth. Where are you? Can you see anything? I see trees. And a small house. Smells weird here. Like old milk. Rachel motioned wildly at Mark and handed him the phone. He put it on speaker. Eli, Rachel said. We're going to find you. Just hold on. Is the man there now? No. He's sleeping. He sleeps during the day. The call cut off. They traced the call. It came from a payphone outside a closed gas station 50 miles north. Detective Keller and a full search team headed straight for it. Rachel begged to go with them and Keller, after hesitation, allowed her and Mark to ride behind the main unit. They reached the gas station by noon. No one had seen the boy, but there were tire tracks in the mud behind the building. A few broken twigs. A white cloth caught on a fence. A tracking dog picked up a scent and led them deeper into the woods. 2 hours passed. At 2:40 p.m., they found the first real clue. A child's shoe, half buried in the dirt. Rachel recognized it immediately. Eli's. The dog kept moving. Another mile. Then, an old hunting cabin, barely standing, with ivy covering most of the door. Keller motioned for silence. They crept forward, guns drawn. The door was unlocked. Inside was dark, dusty, stale. Then someone said, Here. Here. The voice said again louder. They followed it to a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Keller lifted it slowly. A wooden ladder led into darkness. Rachel stepped forward, but Keller stopped her. Let us go first. 2 officers climbed down with flashlights. A minute passed. Then, we've got him. Rachel nearly collapsed. They brought Eli up in a blanket. He was pale, weak, eyes sunken but alive. His hands shook as they reached for his mother. Rachel held him like she'd never let go again. I've got you. I've got you now. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and said, I knew you'd come. They rushed him to the hospital. The man in the gray coat was nowhere to be found. But the cabin held more. Drawings. Hundreds of them. Taped to the walls, folded in boxes spread across the floor. Drawings of children. Wires. Beds. Machines. Some had labels in shaky handwriting. Fixing Eli. Testing stage. Awakening. In one corner, a chalkboard listed names. Dozens. Only 2 were circled in red. Emma. Eli. The detectives took photos. Forensics came in. Samples, fingerprints, everything. They found one photo old and curled. It showed a younger version of the man in the gray coat, standing beside a hospital bed. His ID badge read, Dr. Thomas Griggs, a disgraced physician who had lost his license 12 years ago for unapproved experiments in pediatric neurology. Records showed he vanished after that. No address, no employment, no family. Until now. Detective Keller called in a statewide manhunt. The media picked up the story. Twins declared dead. One resurrected. One abducted. Eli stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. He didn't talk much. He spent most of his time staring out the window. Emma visited daily. They held hands in silence. When Eli finally spoke, he said only, He tried to make me dream forever. Rachel stayed by their side the entire time. And one night, as the stars blinked above the hospital parking lot, she whispered to both of them, "You're home. No one's taking you again. No one's taking you again." It became Rachel's promise. Years passed. Emma started painting. Her first gallery opened when she was 16. Every canvas showed trees, gray coats, and sunlight breaking through clouds. Eli became a firefighter like he always said he would. The man in the gray coat was never found. But Rachel didn't care. She had both her children back. And every year on May 12th they didn't mourn. They celebrated. Not because of death, but because life had come back when everyone else had given up. On the wall in their home, framed between their baby pictures, hung one final drawing. A cabin. A man in a gray coat. Two children walking away from it hand in hand toward the light.